Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first episode of Safari Mack Explores Australia. I'm Safari Mack, your guide and host, helping you make connections to the wild. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are in the Southern Hemisphere, more specifically in the land down under, or Australia. So today, for our exploration, I decided that we were going to hang out a little bit along the beautiful Great Barrier Reef, where we're going to meet some interesting animals along the way before we make our way inland. And so, with that said, I'd like to introduce you all to our first sea animal, the green sea turtle, or Chelonia mitis. But before we begin, if my marine science teacher from high school is watching this, I want you to know that I have dedicated this episode, as well as its part 2 episode, to you specifically, as my way of showing how much fun I had, not only in your class, but in our school's Marine Science Club. And as always, if you're new to my channel, hit that like and subscribe button, check out my Facebook page for content on conservation, and finally, if there's a question, or if you have an animal that you want me to do in the future, just send me an email, which you will always find the link to down in my description below. But if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get started with its family and its evolution. Now, in terms of evolution, you gotta really go back in time to where, during the Mesozoic era, or what we call the Age of the Reptiles, not only was the world ruled by dinosaurs, but the oceans had a menagerie and a beautiful range of diversity of different marine reptiles that once patrolled these oceans, including Archelon, which, as far as we know in the fossil record, is the largest species of sea turtle that ever swam on our planet. But like everything that happens on this planet, eventually all this would go extinct. See, when the dinosaurs disappeared, so too did the massive marine reptiles that once patrolled these oceans. However, there were a few survivors. Thankfully, sea turtles were actually one of the many survivors, along with sharks and rays, but I'm probably getting a little off topic. So, today, we recognize around 7 different species of sea turtles, from the leatherback sea turtle, the largest, to the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle, which is the smallest of all. Now, whether you are on land or in the water, all turtles, as well as tortoises, are part of the reptile family, which are known as the testudines, meaning animal with a hard shell, as well as a sharp beak. Now let's continue on with their habitat, their lifestyle, and their reproduction. Now, with the greatest exception, with no regard to the North or the South Pole, you can basically find green sea turtles, as well as all species of sea turtles, living in the semi-tropical and tropical regions of the world. So all over where it's warm and there's plenty to eat, as well as plenty of beaches to have access to for when it comes time to become a mom or a dad, in a way. So for green sea turtles, they are known. If you're on vacation anywhere in the world and if you're looking for them, you can find them in lagoons, shoals, or one of their best spots, the green sea turtles especially, is the huge lush green meadows of seagrass, where they're able to find their food source and others like it. Now, in terms of their social life, unlike Finding Nemo, where you could see sea turtles kind of like swimming all together as a family, that's just not true. See, sea turtles are not really the most social of animals, and if anything, they would prefer to be left alone. So now we're going to get a little bit into the reproduction stage. For starters, though, male sea turtles never come back ashore. Once they head for the ocean, they will never see the land again. There's absolutely no reason for them to go back. But for the females, they have to come back. So let's call this sea turtle Mary. When Mary was 30 years ago or so, Mary was just a hatchling that made it along with her brothers and sisters into the ocean. 30 years later, she came back to this same beach where she was born to begin the circle of life all over again. So during their breeding season, sea turtles will will lay around 2 to 5 clutches of eggs, in which they can house around 100 or so eggs at a time. Can you imagine yourself carrying that many and having that many different nests throughout their breeding season? Well, as it goes, during the dark of the night, Mom comes out of the ocean. She will find a nice patch of sand, start digging her nest, and will lay around her 100 to maybe even over 115 ping-pong-sized eggs into the sand. And then gently, she carefully covers them up, and then she will abandon them to their own fate. So sea turtles do not take care of their offspring. When they are born, they are completely on their own. And let's just say this. When they are born, it can be a bit of a trickle. But once they're born, I can tell you right now, and this is going to be the sad bit for sea turtles, unfortunately, so many are not going to make it. In fact, in the end, it's estimated that 1 out of 1,000 hatchlings will survive to adulthood. Why that low odd? One of the biggest reasons, predators. So from the moment they come out of the sand, they are pounced upon by crabs and seabirds of different kinds. Pelicans, seagulls, storks, you name it. And here in Australia, as soon as they hit the water, it gets worse. Saltwater crocodiles, sharks, and hungry fish are all waiting just to get a meal out of these small, bite-sized delicacies. It is sad, but in the end, this is probably one of those species that's not meant to be as highly numerous as like other species. See, we have to remember reptiles are considered special because they only have so many, or so many can survive, so that the ecosystem and the circle of life always stays in balance. It can't be one out of the other, otherwise nature seems to fall out of course. So I know I mentioned all those sharks and other predators. So speaking of food, let's talk about their diet. Now, as their name suggests, green sea turtles are basically herbivorous. However, that's not really the case when they are first born. When they're first born, their instinct is to find food, which can take on many different forms, from jellyfish, sea sponges like my buddy SpongeBob, or algae and small fish, even fish eggs, as well as mollusks such as the squid, octopus, snails, slipper lobsters, whatever's they're able to catch, they will bite into it. But as I've said, as they get older, their diets change, and eventually they become, in a way, strict vegans or strict vegetarians, feeding mostly on seagrass as well as other forms of vegetation such as seaweed or algae. Of course, though, that's not to say that they're not going to occasionally, as they're feeding in the seagrass meadows, that they're going to eat a small crustacean from time to time by accident. I mean, that's okay. This is where they have to get as much protein as possible. And here's an early wild thing for you. They get the name green sea turtle because their fat, actually, they look super chubby, and these chubby areas are actually shown to have a green coloring. This comes from years and years of constantly eating seagrass and other forms of algae, as well as different aquatic vegetation. Finally, let's end today's episode with their influence in human culture. So we would probably know about the indigenous, known as the Aboriginals, where these people, the Wapabura, see the sea turtles as the indicators of the seasonal changes. As the sea turtles begin to come up on shore, they know that the season's changing, and they follow their ancient ancestors' tradition. And even the South Keppel people use these animals as different tool, as for leather, as food, for thousands of years before we began civilizing everything. Now, here's another pretty cool thing. We're going to go to the Caribbean for a quick second. Christopher Columbus named the famous island Tortuga after the abundance of sea turtles. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time I have for today's episode, so join me next week for part 2. But until then, this is Safari Mack. I'll see you all out there.